Your diet may not be the thing that fixes your IBD, but it's a super important part of your recovery and healing process. So today I'm going to be showing you what foods you think are safe or have been told are actually good for you that are actually wrecking your gut. I'm going to show you how and why these foods are causing you so many problems that even though you may not realize they're part of your problems, once you take them out, you'll feel so much better. And I'm also going to show you what they're actually doing to things like your immune system to make these problems worse. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Josh Deck. I'm an IBD specialist, medical lecturer, physician's consultant, and the scientific strategist and education director for the RCFCC. And today we are talking about the top foods that you think are good for you, but are actually wrecking your gut. Now, I do want to preface these are going to be different for everyone across the board. There are things that will be bad for 95% of people, but you're the lucky one and you can have them with no issue. So that's a different story, but we're going to go through some of these individualities. The first thing I want to talk to you about is whole grains. Now, I'm going to put these up here along the way, okay? Whole grains. You may have been told that whole grains are part of a nutritious diet, that whole grains are necessary for health, that whole grains are part of the food pyramid. The food pyramid sucks, quite frankly. So whole grains are going to be things like brown rice, whole wheat bread, your oats, etc. And so the reason these are going to be really bad for you is a few things. Number one, high fiber can sometimes be very difficult in IBD for a lot of different reasons. But there's also something in these grains called phytic acid, which can be hard on inflamed digestive systems. With your bowel disease, you're already inflamed, and so you're going to have some issues with these as a whole. Another thing that we see a lot of, an immense amount of, is glyphosate. Now, this is especially your non-organics. I'm not even worried about the gluten and crossover in some of these things when they're grown together. What I'm worried about is the glyphosate and the folic acid they spray on these. So glyphosate is an extremely nasty herbicide. I believe it's an herbicide, that's right. And so it causes a lot of harm in your gut. It destroys your gut microbiome, triggers all kinds of stuff to your immune system. There are toxins in there linked to cancer. In fact, the creators, Bayer, who bought Monsanto, the creators of glyphosate, recently paid out over $11 billion, with a B, $11 billion to settle over 100,000 cancer lawsuits directly linked to their glyphosate. There's still 30 or 40,000 more pending. So it is known to be horrible for you, but money talks and we're still using it today. Another thing we see sprayed across grains a lot as well is folic acid. Now you think, well, folic acid is great. Pregnant women need folic acid. They don't. What we need is a proper form of folate, like an L5-methylfolate, where this form is very bioavailable. There's a large percentage of the population, estimated to be at least 44%, some will argue up to 80%, who cannot utilize folic acid properly, and through a chain of events in your liver and genetics and all kinds of stuff, it ends up causing all kinds of problems in your digestive system, bloating, inflammation, can push your immune system to the wrong direction, can cause anxiety and depressive episodes, which again make your immunity worse. So there's all kinds of nasty things in grains you want to watch for. So between the fiber, the phytic acid, the glyphosate, the folic acid, be very, very careful. If you're going to be eating whole grains, my recommendation would be to be ancient grains, if you insist on eating grains, or honestly just avoid them altogether. Get them organic, get them imported from Italy for a special occasion. They tend to be a lot easier on the body than the stuff we grow here. That's number one. The next one we're talking about, this one you should know. If not, you're going to learn real quick, is raw foods. Raw foods can be really, really nasty. We're talking raw kale, raw spinach, raw broccoli, raw celery. Now, if you know me, I'm not a big advocate for plant-based diets anyways. Just for the general population, I find it's very difficult to get people to thrive, especially when dealing with bowel disease, on plant-based diets. There's a lot of reasons for that, but in general, these what we call insoluble fibers. These are the scratchy things that don't really absorb. If you look at apple pectin, for example, apple pectin is a soluble fiber. It's really soft. It absorbs water and kind of balloons up like a sponge. Whereas these insoluble, scratchy fibers tend to cause a lot more problems. It's really rough. It can act like sandpaper. It irritates your gut. And interestingly enough, statistically speaking, in the Western world, there are studies indicating that over here, at least industrialized, westernized countries, tend to have a lack of a lot of the microbes we need in our gut to break down fiber. Because you don't break down fiber. Your digestive system will never break down fiber on its own. You don't have the enzymes in your body to do it. It's your gut bacteria that actually take them, break them down, they ferment them, and turn them into beneficial things like fatty acids or short chain fatty acids and things like that, which can help your gut lining and your immune system. And so in general, my rule, if you're gonna have vegetables or plants, you wanna go with something that's gonna be soft, cooked, skinned, and don't go with the cruciferous vegetables so much, things that are scratchy. Go with things that absorb water really well and get soft and mushy after being cooked, or of course when they're sitting by themselves. That's my first one. Now, the next one, this is gonna be number 3. The third thing I want you to watch out for in your foods. These ones are going to be high histamines. Now, there's a lot of foods in this list you actually think are good for you. You think are really helpful for you, but did you know they're high histamine? So these high histamine foods are going to be things like your fermented foods, things like cured meats, so your salamis, especially deli meats, anything smoked. Leftover food that's been sitting in the fridge for a day or two is higher in histamines. Things that have been canned, anything fermented, including your cheeses. We want to watch things like bone broth. Bone broth is extremely high histamine. Spinach, avocados, fruit that is over ripened, things with vinegar, chocolate, even yeast products like your breads and even some sourdoughs, as well as certain nuts like cashews. I know it sounds like I'm taking all the good foods off the table, but hear me out. These ones tend to be higher in histamine. Now, what histamines do, you know histamines from allergic reactions, anaphylaxis, where you have an allergy, you break out in hives, your throat swells up, and your heart starts racing, and those rashes, those hives you get, those are histamine responses. Well, we know that bowel disease tends to be dominant in a particular immune pathway that we call Th2. It's just the name of the immune pathway. Well, histamines are actually on the same pathway. And so if you know my cup analogy, what happens is your body's like a cup of water. As it starts to fill up, you develop symptoms, it overflows, and we have disease. Well, a lot of triggers that create bowel disease happen to be filling up this same cup. And then high histamine foods also fill this cup. And they can increase your immune responses, way overcharging that system, and suddenly you've got a reaction, you've got bloat, you've got diarrhea, you're irritable, you're crampy, you're not feeling very good, you can't sleep very well, you're feeling dopey and lightheaded, and your memory's kind of foggy. It can be excessive histamines causing a lot of these problems. And so you really want to watch for some of those foods. High histamine can be really, really nasty. So my rule is going to be low histamine. And toward the end of this as well, I'm going to give you 3 simple rules to follow. I'm also going to give you access to my approved, I say quote, approved IBD foods list, because everyone's different, but you'll have to sort through these on your own and figure out what's good for you based on the 3 rules. And so the next one we're going to give you, I want you to watch for these, is going to be citrus. You may have been told there's lots of vitamins, lots of electrolytes, lots of good stuff in citrus, and though those are true, some people can be very sensitive to citrus. So your lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruits, these sort of skinned fruits can be very, very hard on the system. There's high acidity. This can trigger some diarrhea. If you've got an already aggravated or inflamed GI, especially if you're pushing into or going towards a flare, this can also stimulate more bowel movements and a lot of issues with that. The other thing we actually see with citrus fruits is this word we just talked about called histamines. Citrus are known as histamine liberators, and this means they can actually take histamine and release them into the body, kind of like popping that balloon full of confetti and goes everywhere. And so citrus can be a histamine liberator, driving up that same immune pathway, causing you some issues or some inflammation, irritation. So we really want to watch out for those as well. Okay, the next one I'm getting into, guys. Next one I want you to watch for. I promise we're going to have some alternatives for you, okay? It's going to be nightshades. What are nightshades? Nightshades are a whole class of vegetables. This is going to be things like your tomatoes, your bell peppers, your eggplants, potatoes. These contain chemicals called alkaloids. This is a plant defense mechanism of sorts. It can irritate people who are sensitive. Now, the truth is not everyone is sensitive to nightshades, but reducing these or cutting these out of your diet might actually produce some good results for you if you've not tried it yet. So there's a lot of people who have some immune sensitivity or some sensitivity to nightshades. This can disrupt your gut barrier or the integrity of your gut lining. It can be a common dietary trigger in people with autoimmunity or autoimmune type conditions. And so as a general rule, when we're looking at someone dealing with food sensitivities and immune issues, the first things we're going to drop are going to be gluten. That's a gimme. Dairy, anything fermented, and nightshades, alcohol, sugars, all those artificial foods. But nightshades can be a big trigger. particularly for those in autoimmunity. The exact mechanisms as to why, there's a lot of debate around that, but we do see a lot of sensitivity with nightshades. So you definitely want to watch for those. The next one I'm going to tell you to watch for is a whole group of foods that your doctor may have actually recommended to you. And I have a huge bone to pick with this one because these foods are recommended because it manages symptoms. It can help temporarily, but in the long run, it's going to be really nasty for you. I try to come up with clever analogies to explain these things, but think about it this way. If I give you a short fix now, you have a blister on the back of your heel. We're going for a hike. You're not wearing any socks. Your heel starts to blister. And what do? I say, well, tell you what, here's some numbing cream. Put that on. You're going to keep walking. You're going to keep hiking. You're not going to feel the problem until the hike is finished. Like, holy shit, my foot is bleeding. I can see my tendon. I got no skin on the back of my foot. Because we just covered the symptom for now, but it got worse and you didn't notice until it was too late, and then you did. And so here's what I want you to watch out for. If you find any foods that are whiter than I am, that's going to be a problem. Because I am Scandinavian and see-through. You could see all my veins if I didn't have tattoos all over the place. And so here's what we want you to look for. White foods can be really nasty. Now I actually took a list. I actually wrote a big list down here on my notes I'm going to read out to you. I pulled this off of a gastroenterology clinic called Gastro North. Now, in their defense, this is a white diet that is used for prep in colonoscopies in lieu of a clear liquids diet, and they did some study to figure out that it really didn't change the results and detection of things like polyps and other things that they were looking for inside of their colonoscopies. However, I took this information and compared it with the standard white diet that a lot of dietitians at the hospital or doctors may recommend for you to be taking when you're going through and having flares or having issues. I want to explain this white diet, why it's so bad or so good, theoretically. Now here's the deal. These white foods, I'll put a big list up here for you, but these white foods are considered low residue. So they are bland, they're fairly gentle on the GI system, and again, they can be used in prep, or they were used in the study as a prep in lieu of colonoscopy, and doctors often recommend it. Why? It's the same reason they recommend painkillers or numbing cream or whatever it is. They're managing the symptoms, and if we do that, we're happy with the outcome. As long as you're not terribly inflamed, I'm happy. But here's the issue that I start to see with this. White foods are low residue. Now picture this. If I'm going for a walk up a flight of stairs, and my ankle is sprained. I've actually just had ankle surgery recently, so I'm not even standing on this one leg. But picture this, I'm walking up a flight of stairs. My ankle is sprained. My ankle is inflamed. Now I could limp up the flight of stairs and I'd get through it, get to the top, and I might be a little sore, but I'm fine. That's you eating your normal meals. Now what happens if I were to throw a backpack with 100 pounds in it and walk up that same flight of stairs with that same sprained ankle? What happens? That ankle is going to feel horrific. I'm not going to get up to the top. I'm going to end up crawling, probably go to the hospital and need something like morphine to take care of the pain because it's been so severe. Because I put a lot of excess mechanical load, mechanical pressure, wear and tear on my inflamed tissue. And so the white diet, somebody picks you up and carries you up the stairs. The white diet, most of that's going to break down in your mouth. There's very little mechanical turning and churning and a lot of very minimal mechanical work, so to speak, to be done by your GI system. They're low residue, so low fiber, so there's nothing brushing up against your tissues. You don't need bacteria really to break them down because it's mostly done by the time it gets to your GI. So they feel better. But on the back end of this, a lot of these can contribute to dysbiosis. They can cause issues in the immune responses. They can cause a lot of stress to your immune system. And in the long run, they can cause more problems. So it comes back to the numbing cream on the heel going for a hike. It might feel good right now, but by the time you're done, it's going to be a big issue. And so some of these white foods, I'll actually read you a little list I put down here. Things like mayonnaise. So again, whatever store-bought mayonnaise, you got your soybean oils and canola oils and other stuff. Margarine, white bread, rice cereals or other white cereals like Cheerios, cooking oils. So we're talking about your canolas and soybean and safflower, which are directly correlated to all kinds of inflammatory conditions and issues. White flour, sugar, this is their list. White chocolate, vanilla ice cream, lemonade popsicles, apple juice. What do these things all have in common? Sugar. Even basic carbohydrates like white rice and these white starches, they break down in your mouth. You can test this. If you chew like a soda cracker, you chew it salty when it goes in, it's got salt on top. If you chew it for about 60 seconds, you'll actually taste it'll become sweet because all carbs break down to sugar, little glucose. There's a little glucose molecule, C6H12O6. And they all break down to the same thing. And so what's happening is because it's breaking down, it's already absorbing into your mouth, it's not going to make its way down far enough typically to where you're having issues. And so the foods they listed is that mayonnaise, white bread, rice cereal, cooking oils, white flour, sugar, white chocolate, vanilla ice cream, lemonade, popsicles, and apple juice. Sugar, 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 sugar. The only positive foods on the white diet that I found were chicken breast and white fish, no skin, butter, cream, some cheese, which we know we got to watch for histamines, and eggs. I'm great with those foods. It's everything else around it that happens to be under the same color spectrum we have to be careful of. And so we think they're good because it's a low mechanical load, but they're really nasty for us for a few different reasons. What does sugar do? We know sugar increases blood sugar, spikes your blood glucose, which makes it extremely hard. It triggers all kinds of inflammatory processes, makes it hard for healing. It's a big, big issue. These foods are generally low in nutrients. I said generally because like your white fish, your eggs, cream, butter, I'm a big fan. Butter is full of nutrients, like real raw or real butter from a farm, not that store crap, but real butter is really good for you. But generally these are low in nutrients. So your white bread, your rice cereal, vanilla ice cream, you're not getting anything beneficial, and the sugar is causing more problems. And so they're low in nutrients, they can spike your blood sugar, and of course, they can actually promote what we call dysbiosis, or this imbalance in your gut bacteria. Another major problem, and it feeds these opportunistic microbes, especially nasty ones that we can see. Yeast is okay, but overgrowth of yeast is bad. And we see a lot of this inside bowel disease. We see a lot of candida and other dysbiosis, and these foods tend to feed them. Well, I'm going to give you a quick list. There's 3 rules to follow when you're looking for food. The first one is going to be whole foods. Are you eating foods that are whole, that grow on the earth, in a tree, in a bush, they fly, they swim, they walk, or God forbid, crawl? These are the foods that we've been eating since the beginning of time, and the only foods humans are really meant to even digest. In fact, there's an interesting argument that whole milk, raw milk, we've been drinking it only about 15,000 years since the first cattle or dairy animals were domesticated. And that's another theory as to why so many of us still can't digest it, is we haven't adapted to. Well, picture the foods we've had just in the last 100 years. That is a sliver in time. And all these foods we're eating, cereals and artificial oils and all these things, they never existed, except in this one sliver of time. Yet coincidentally, we have more disease than ever before. 3,000% increase in bowel disease in North America since the 1950s. In fact, North America is less than 5% of the global population. They have more than, depends on the stats, up to 50% of the world's cases of Crohn's and colitis. So there's a big problem here with the foods that we're eating, okay? So the first one we want to make sure is whole foods. The second one, and this is the individuality, it's going to be tolerable foods. I might recommend eggs for one person, they feel terrible for you. I got a client who's eating nuts and seeds and feels amazing, and that's great for her. Somebody else eats them and they feel terrible. So we want to make sure that the whole foods are also tolerable for you. So it's kind of a gimme. And then my third rule is going to be low in histamines. Now why? Like we talked about, bowel disease tends to be dominant in particular immune pathways, Th2, Th17 we call them, that's T helper cells, the Th. But these pathways number 2 and 17. Well, pathway number 2 in bowel disease is also a histamine pathway. And so we eat histamines, what's already an overworked immune system is going to continue overworking and overreacting and getting much worse when we're eating high histamines. And so you're going to feel a lot of bad, nasty responses from that much of the time. These are my 3 rules. Now, I do have a list that I've generated that is low histamine, low FODMAP, generally IBD friendly. They're whole foods, the works. There's meats, there's oils, there's fruits and veg, and all kinds of stuff that are generally well tolerated. Some of it might be contradictory to what we talked about today because it's based on general tolerance. Now, if you're here, you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast and you want access to my list for the IBD friendly foods, there's going to be a link below in the show notes that you can take a look for to download that completely free. My gift to you to make sure you have access to some good quality foods that abide by these 3 main rules that we talked about.